everybody. How's it going? Welcome to the Technology Leadership Series podcast. I'm your host, Jordan Tennenbaum. I'm the social media manager of Celigo. We are joined by Martin Zerrudo, the CEO of Sellers Universe, as well as Mark Simon, who's Celigo's VP of Strategy. Very happy and lucky to have you guys here. Mark, if you don't mind doing a quick introduction, and then we can get into it.
You bet. Thanks, Jordan. From an intro standpoint, I've been working in the digital transformation space for a long time, probably close to close to 20 years. It's getting up to be, which makes me feel old just mentioning that. But I've been with Celigo for the last 4 years. As VP of strategy. I work with really our whole set of customers and helping them in a variety of ways with their automation journey. But prior to Celigo, my background includes being on the founding team and CTO of an e-commerce company, as well as leading a digital transformation and ERP implementation professional services practice for about 10 years. And that's where I got exposure to Celigo and really, focused a lot on cloud-based technologies and kind of led me to joining the Celigo team.
Well, awesome. We're lucky to have you, Mark. And now for the guest of honor, Martin. You are the CEO of Sellers Universe, as we said. You mind giving us just a little bit about your background, a little bit about your story, and
Sure.
maybe how you made it to Sellers Universe and what you guys got going on now, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, Jordan, again, thank you so much for having me on the show. And Mark, always a pleasure to see you. Every time I see any kind of outdoor winter sports, you're the first person that comes to mind because I know you're an expert. Probably do like a biathlon after this, but
well, aren't you up in the frozen north in
Yeah.
Ontario somewhere? So you must see that must happen constantly all winter long.
Oh yeah, I see slopes outside my door. Do I know how to ski them? Absolutely not. That's for another show. But yeah, thank you so much for having me on. My name is Martin Zerrudo, the CEO of Seller Universe. At Seller Universe, we do two things. Well, I guess three. We provide NetSuite solutions, license implementation, and post-go live support within the e-commerce realm. So those brands who are on marketplaces like Amazon and Shopify have a great relationship with Celigo in terms of the implementations that we provide and the support. Probably say 9 out of 10 of the brands that we provide services to that are aggregators are using Celigo. And so it's a pleasure to be on the show. Personally, probably about 5 to 10 years of experience in marketing and communications. And these last 3 years, the journey at Seller Universe has really been pretty crazy. It started off as a really big umbrella of a lot of different e-commerce services, and we really decided in the last 2 years to focus primarily on NetSuite solutions. So super happy to be on the show.
Awesome. That's great to hear. Mark, I know we had spoken a little bit earlier. You had some specific questions you wanted to bring up to Martin, or just some specific topics. So I was hoping maybe you could lead into those.
Yeah, you bet, Jordan. So Martin, when you're working with your clients, are you typically coming in and working on their essentially a new build, like a new implementation for, say, their ERP or some of their other software implementations? Or are you coming in after they already have something in place and helping them optimize? Where do you come in that journey?
Great question. Mark, ideally we'd like to be end to end. So right at the very beginning where they're kind of considering switching to an ERP, graduating from a QuickBooks and a couple of tech stacks that aren't really communicating with each other or able to scale in the direction that the company's headed. We'd love to be at that, part of the conversation where they're considering getting a NetSuite license because we can provide the license to them. But I want to say a bulk of our customers are probably in the second two, or the second and the third step, which is having their NetSuite implemented, or it's already implemented and they need some post-go live support. And the conversation of us providing support in conjunction with Celigo usually happens in the second or third stage, which is they're implementing, they want to know what are the best integrations out there, they're connecting to all the different marketplaces, or they're already connected using Celigo, they've already implemented, they need a little bit of bandwidth and some expertise in the particular space, and so we come in and provide that as well.
Fantastic. That's great. When you're talking to customers in that journey, especially initially when they're first, I often think of like a digital transformation journey for a mid-market company. It often centers around ERP. That's kind of like often a big trigger point, right? They're at a phase in growth where they need something different. But are they, are they generally thinking about automating and integrating? Is it central to what they're doing, or is it coming later on? It's kind of an afterthought for them. What do you see mostly?
I think thankfully when we have conversations with brands who are considering shifting to NetSuite or are on NetSuite, they're trying to find the most bang for buck. How do I optimize this workflow? How do I optimize this infrastructure that we've invested a lot of time and money in? Thankfully, the conversation is at a level where they're aware that automation is needed to scale, right? When they're thinking about if we're having discovery calls and they're not sure about using a NetSuite ERP, then that's usually where a little bit of education comes in. Hey, you can actually automate this. You can automate that. You can be less people dependent. You can free up the time for your directors or your VPs or your C-suite level talent to start actually growing the business instead of, shifting through thousands of Google Docs and Google Sheets and Excel spreadsheets. And it's funny, we talk to multi-million-dollar brands every day, and some of them are inundated with like 12 instances of Xero, or they're inundated with hundreds of spreadsheets. And they're like, yes, we would love automation, but they don't know where to start. They don't know, this mythological space of AI learned automated everything where it's just a click of a button. I can go to Bali and run my whole company. It's possible, but where do they start? And usually it's starting off with understanding the power of NetSuite and the power of the integrations like Celigo that can facilitate that automation and that scale.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, something that we've seen, and we work with everything from companies in the Fortune 500 all the way through a ton of mid-market down to small startups. And one thing is consistently that we see over and over again, that they buy these applications, and they could be big foundational applications. It might be a SaaS app, it might be an HRIS system, it might be a new data warehouse, whatever it may be. And they make that investment, they get it implemented, and we just see time and time again that they don't quite feel like they get the value from it.
Correct.
That it solves some of the problems, but it's really interesting. See that a lot where it's like, oh, hey, it's like, yeah, it's working sort of, kind of, yeah, didn't quite get there all the way. And there's often really one important missing piece from that, which is the automation component. How's it plugging into all the other systems? Have they really automated and created one system?
Yeah, an example sometimes I use is like you can take a really great car, like say a car from maybe like 20, 30 years ago, super great engine, great parts, runs really, really fast. You compare it to some of the cars today where they have onboard chips, where all the parts, both analog and digital, are talking to each other. That really provides the driver with a lot of tools to maximize that car. At the end of the day, you still need a driver who's driving your NetSuite implementation, who's driving your NetSuite. It's not just gonna, hey, I'm gonna pay for NetSuite and it's gonna run my business. That's not how it works. But it'll be that onboard chip that connects all of the things you've invested into to give you, as the driver of your business, the tools that you need to really accelerate the growth of your company.
Unfortunately, self-driving is not really yet viable.
They released it, and then like 5 days later, they're like, forget it. We're gonna let you drive your cars again.
Well, I have a quick question for actually both of you. As someone who's not as extremely technical, do you think a lot of people come in to an automation mindset or learn about automation within a business, and they think about it too narrowly, as in data from X to Y, and that's it? Or do you think people come into it where they think, I want X to Y and A to B and C to D and this to that, and all so overly connected, like you said, you could go to Bali and run your business? Where do you see most kind of adopters on which side of the spectrum, or do most of them kind of fall in the middle?
Well, I'll take a crack at that, Jordan. That's something that I know, from what I see and what we see as an organization, most companies are coming in there, and it's automation integration is reactionary to them. They're responding to an acute problem that they had. And sometimes they've had that acute problem before, and they know, okay, I know that I have to get my I don't want to move my sales orders from my e-commerce site, and especially when they have multiple ones, they're like, I know I don't want to do this manually and bring it into my order management system or my ERP. But they're responding to that either because of that pain that they have right now or pain that they've had in the past. And they're not stepping back and looking at this and saying, hey, what's the roadmap? What can I automate? Like, what should we automate? And one of the things that we often talk about and try to get companies look like, and this is really from seeing leaders that have used automation as competitive advantage is they shift to something, we call it automation first mindset. And they start with, okay, something comes up and it's a new process, a new system. We're like, how can we automate it? And they just start there. And they may not get to it right away, but they're always thinking. And that's one thing that I've seen that really, that's a big differentiator from the ones that just automate and they get some things done versus the ones that really change their businesses and transform them through automation.
That makes sense.
No, totally agree. If I may add just a little bit, we were talking to an aggregator last week, and just outright is investing in an ERP the most cost effective solution into scaling? Not necessarily. Is utilizing best in class integrations like Celigo the most cheapest option out there? Not necessarily. But if you look at cost in terms of the value of automation, sometimes it's difficult for them to see. Oh my gosh, I'm paying all this. Like, can I just get some app? Literally was talking to somebody last week. Can I just get some quick app that's like $20 a month to automate it? Like, not all automations are made equal, and not all automations, provide that scalability. It may answer one or two pain points, but what we're talking about here is long-term growth, long-term projections in terms of where your company can go. And having automations there kind of reduces any kind of human error, reliance on particular people that may or may not be there 3, 4, 5 years down the road. And so for me, from the agency perspective, it's kind of showing them the value that, yes, there may be an upfront financial cost to automating your system, but if you don't do that in the next 3 to 5 years, then you're not looking at the same trajectory, regardless of who are the same people running the company or not.
That makes sense. It seems like people need to address the cause rather than the symptoms, if I can use a mediocre metaphor. But thank you. Appreciate that, y'all.
Can I just add one more thing? Sorry, go ahead, Mark. Go
ahead. No, go ahead, Martin.
So for me, I have like 10 years of copywriting experience in content, writing scripts, creating content, going on podcasts. And when ChatGPT came out and open to everybody to access, if you want to see the power of automation, it would take me maybe 2-3 hours to write, a blog or an article. You just type in a couple of prompts, and automation and AI learning will generate that content for you. Now, it doesn't mean it's perfect. It doesn't mean, in the example of NetSuite and having Celigo, that there's no errors to manage or there's no, work to be done and try to upkeep the automations. But it does all that heavy lifting for you. I can write an even better piece of content utilizing AI and automation. And that last 10% is me editing, fine-tuning, making sure that it makes sense, make sure it sounds like a human being. It's the exact same thing when you're talking about Celigo and an ERP like NetSuite. It's just doing that 90% for you, but don't disregard that 10% is still on you to make sure that it's running in the direction that the automation is working the way that you intend it to. And I think that's the true magic, is when you see that 90 plus 10, then you're getting that 100% value from your investment.
Especially with something like an ERP or a financial program where it's like you have to cross your T's and dot your I's. There's no can't fall short. But sorry, go ahead,
it's
Mark.
it's not a shortcut. Automation isn't a shortcut. Right? It's just making things easier.
Yeah, it doesn't eliminate the work, but it creates it eliminates the menial work, and it still creates opportunity for higher value work in the organization. But the comment I wanted to make on what you were talking about there, Martin, before, was just what you're describing around getting asked for, is there an app for that? That's kind of like what we hear when someone's looking for or has adopted a point-to-point. Some of these point-to-point integration solutions are kind of like these little black boxes, and they solve little problems pretty well. And if your requirements line up with those, you might be lucky, especially when a company's pretty small, doesn't have a lot of revenue. Simple processes, they plug that in, it works for a while, but it's not a platform. It's not a tool. It can't respond to a changing business. As soon as your business changes, you're like, oh, I can't use this anymore. I need something else. And then you end up doing any number of things, or just putting up with something that doesn't work right for a long time.
Agreed. It's like from one Band-Aid solution to the next. And hey, some people like being scrappy that way. Some people like to kind of be on the cutting edge of new applications and say, hey, look, this is doing what I need to do at half the cost. And then 6 months later, the app integrations no longer work. It's no longer supported. The person who was running it is no longer there. Then what are you going to do? Like you said, Mark, you go back to the beginning and try and find another Band-Aid solution,
And that's never fun with APIs, because those can be very, very, very tricky to manage, especially when you have 10, 15, 20 of them trying to work and talk together all at once. So no, that's a really good point. Appreciate that from both y'all.
Martin, you mentioned something about a Band-Aid. It kind of reminds me of like the feeling of pain. I know you mentioned, your preference for doing new, new implementations. And I think that's, having been in the consulting business, it's sort of always the preference to have as much greenfield as possible. But
Definitely.
I know you're still doing some of that work where you're coming in and you're responding to that pain, where a customer says, "Hey, I have this pain, I have this, and it's not working." How much do you see of that where customers are, they might have had an automation solution and they went live and it worked for them at one point, but then over time it doesn't work that well for them anymore, and they're like, "Oh, it's broken," or I'm buried under these errors or something like that. How often do you see that?
Quite often, actually, in the context of us providing NetSuite solutions, when we come in for like what we call project recovery, hey, our implementation has gone haywire, or we tried doing it this way, it didn't work out. I'll tell you guys this stat: 50%, according to Oracle NetSuite, 50% of ERPs implementations fail because they start off with the wrong partner. Now, I'm not on the show saying, hey, our team knows all kinds of NetSuite. We'll do nonprofit, we'll do medical, we'll do industrial, everything. That's not what we are. It literally says in the poster behind me, e-commerce, because we specialize in wholesale, retail, manufacturing, that whole space, specifically also with aggregators. So when we get brought in to implement implementation recovery, it's because they worked with a partner who didn't have expertise in that area. And they'll say, oh, yeah, we can set up your Celigo for you. And then they get in contact with Mark's team. They start working. And the next thing you know, when they hand it off to them to make sure that the tiles are set up properly, that they're checking any kind of error management, they have no idea what they're doing. They're not even Celigo certified. Like, that's crazy, and unfortunately that's my ocean, whether it's blue or red. We're competing with people who say that they can do everything, that they know everything. One thing that I say in all of our pitch meetings is like, see this guy right here, super important guy, Mark Simon. I have his phone number. I text him way too often. He doesn't always reply, but that's okay. And I said, that's what we do for you as your partner. We have a relationship with him and with Celigo that if we're coming in here saying we're experts and we're able to kind of quarterback the conversation, then it's not only saving you time, it's saving you the headache of having to talk to ACS, talk to Mark and his team, talk to this other person, talk to this guy who did scripting for me for $5 on Fiverr, and now it's not working. Like, you don't have to go through all of that pain. And the automation aspect of it really removes a lot of it. And being able to work with people who have the expertise in the space removes a lot of that pain as well.
Yeah, I think you hit on something really, really key there. A lot of key points there, but one of the things that really stands out for me is working with someone that knows your business, that as much as possible knows the understands the type of company you are, and even where there's a subvertical. You've brought up several times, Amazon aggregators, brand aggregators, kind of different terms for them. But that's an example of something. When you talk about implementations failing, I was just on the phone last week with one whose ERP implementation failed, and they were starting all over from scratch, and it was because they didn't work with someone that actually knew the needs of a brand aggregator. And it's sometimes it's like, oh, well, it's good, and someone's implemented or integrated to an e-commerce site that maybe they've integrated to Shopify, they've integrated to Amazon before, they know a little bit of NetSuite. That's good enough. They've done some e-com, but doing the ERP implementation for a 1 or 2 channel e-commerce company is vastly different than doing the same thing, doing this implementation for a 50 brand or 100 brand a brand aggregator, and when each of those brands might have in turn 5, 10 sales channels for each of them. The needs are completely different from just the ERP side, let alone when you get into trying to automate it, integrate it, make sure you've got the right tools. And this is one of the, and that's just a example of something that we both have worked with in the past and are familiar with. But I've seen that repeated, very often, where the results are always better when from an implementation standpoint, if you work with someone that knows, really, either they take the time to learn your business, one, or they come in and they already know the space, and then they add in that time to learn your business.
Exactly. When we had our conversations, I think late last year, I said, Mark, the writing is on the wall. We're talking to 80, 90% of our clients in this space that Celigo is non-negotiable. they're all in on Celigo's automation, but they need support from translating all of that automation onto their ERP. And then when they go to NetSuite, they may not have that expertise in terms of translating it back to Celigo. And so for us, we went all in. If we're going to own this niche or vertical in the ERP space, in the NetSuite space, then we're going to go all in with the key players. That means working with Celigo, working with the Anvils, with the Fleabers, with the Topaltis, so on and so forth, because they're going to come to us, if not us providing them that proactive guidance, like, hey, you guys should probably use Celigo. There are a couple ones out there, but they're best in class for a reason. They may not be the cheapest, but they're definitely the easiest to work with. That's kind of the conversations that we have.
Yeah, for us at Celigo, it's so important having good partners that not just know the technical side, that the nuts and bolts of software, whether it's Celigo or NetSuite or both, but that understand the business process behind it, that can go a level deeper. Because it's so often we hear something or someone, they'll say, hey, I've had this integration for a while, I have this automation in place, and now it's not working and it's broken. And you go in and you look at it and you start peeling back the layers, and in what you do this a few times, and you realize, well, that integration, that automation, that's sitting on top of two really fundamental things: good business process design, and then endpoint implementation. So if your ERP isn't implemented to your business process, or you didn't adopt the right business process as a company, right? That's a whole, you could do a whole podcast on that.
That's not your fault though. That's not on you, Mark. Don't worry.
Yeah, exactly. That's on somebody else on the, and I'm out of that business now, so happy to be. But that's like, so much goes into that. And what the interesting thing is, like, an integration ends up being your early warning system for your business, because you implement it. If you implement it and you get it running, you've automated for a set of use cases. And now if something changes in the business, it doesn't match those use cases, and it shows up as an error. And now you have to take action. And that's really key. Ideally, you have to get to the bottom of that and figure out, and what it is, an error is actually a failure in change management, that it showed up in your, it showed up in your integration first, but it's a process change, or it's a data change, or it's an endpoint change with one of those other systems. And it's great to have that in place, because now something's telling you where it is, but you've got to have somebody to, often work with to guide, especially at smaller companies, to guide you and give you the right guidance to figure out what to do if you don't have the skills in house.
Martin, do you find that a lot of people use Celigo or maybe similar tools as like an error management solution, or is that something that you encourage? Because Mark, from the way that you put it, it makes a lot of sense. You have everything all connected at once, shows you exactly where an error might be. So I'm curious, like, how Martin or Mark, how we both would pass that information along, that a tool like iPass is error management.
Sure. So, for those who are listening, like, Celigo as an iPass can do more than just the niche in which Seller Universe operates, right? We're talking strictly, what are we connecting here? Amazon, Shopify, Walmart, all these other marketplaces. So our expertise is navigating, first of all, creating the tile and the mapping and the workflow so that all that information is coming in correctly. And if there's any kind of errors, that we troubleshoot that, or being brought into an implementation that has Celigo in there and it wasn't mapped out correctly. And unfortunately, they blame Mark and his team, like, oh, Celigo said it was going to work and now it's not working. We go in there, we take a look, and it's like, well, it's because you didn't set it up properly. Well, who set it up? Oh, this guy who used to work for us. Okay, well, we've identified 2 or 3 issues here that had nothing to do with Celigo. It also has nothing to do with NetSuite. It really was a person who kind of set up the automation, who may not have had, like, to Mark's point earlier, the expertise in creating it. And then now you don't have any talent to navigate that. So error management happens. There is no such thing as a foolproof automation where you're never going to get any kind of errors, or you don't have to double check the data integrity. Like, it happens. But if you have a team in place, whether it's a partner like us or an internal team that can navigate it, then, it's just part of the job. But you're not looking at 100,000 errors. You're looking at maybe 10 or 5. It just really all depends on who got there at the beginning to make it or map it out correctly.
Awesome.
And I think that's the key thing, Martin. You've got to stay on top. One of the key things, you got to stay on top of it. You got to stay on top of it when it's 5 or 20 or 50 or 100 errors and it's manageable. And if you have, if you have 500 or 1,000. And we have some features, our error management 2.0, and we leverage some AI to help make that management a lot easier, but it still doesn't remove the need to get to the bottom of them and head them off and get to the root cause. And it's like, oh, there was a change up here. Somebody created a new business, a new process, or they created, on their own without synchronizing across the organization. And now you've got a problem. That's not going to work.
Exactly.
Oh, interesting. That's a very good way to put it in perspective, especially for someone like me who's, not on the technical side of things. So hopefully listeners out there, hopefully that kind of gave you some good insight. I'm going to just change direction slightly. We can always come back to some technical things, but Martin, I wanted to give you a little bit of opportunity to shine here. Don't worry, you're already shining, but shine brighter, I guess. So you've built Sellers Universe quite a bit over the last 5-10 years, as you said. Really grown the business. Let's kind of do a bird's eye perspective, maybe 5 to 10 years from now. What are you looking to accomplish? What are your goals for Sellers Universe, and maybe working with Celigo as well, but mostly just Sellers Universe and what you look to accomplish?
Oh, thank you so much, Jordan. And I want everybody to know that like what we've accomplished up until this point is not the work of just one person. Not that that's what you were, inferring, but it takes a village, right? And when we were at S3, and then the week after that, we were at Sweet World last year. And thank you for hosting that party, Mark. It was pretty awesome. We realized, like, man, Amazon account management is such a red ocean. Like, it's super duper cutthroat. We were doing fine. We brought in a lot of business last year. It's just, there's this movie, I forgot what it was called, but the line was, "Is the juice worth the squeeze?" And we were just squeezing a lot and getting some of that vitamin C in our eyes, and it was super painful on the Amazon side. But then we were like, on the NetSuite side, we're talking to customers who have the funds to invest in an ERP. They have the funds to utilize the full breadth of Celigo's automation services. We should probably be talking to these kind of clients, because we're talking from a level of congruency, not only just in revenue, but in vision. Where do you want to go in the next couple of years, and not, hey, what's your listing optimization look like, and how much are you able to pay for us to fix it? Nothing wrong with that business model, and obviously that's a big proponent in increasing your sales on one marketplace, but NetSuite really is more of an all-encompassing approach in terms of the services that we want to provide. So in the next 3 to 5 years for Seller Universe, my hope is that we continue in this trajectory. My hope is that despite it being competitive, there's a lot of alliance partners, solution providers, and then you also have NetSuite Direct that can sometimes be competitive in terms of the brands that you're trying to close. But at the end of the day, we're going to focus on our lane. We'll put our head down and put in the work and do shows like this and really build that brand equity and authenticity, that if I say, or if somebody on our team says, hey, we have a great relationship with Celigo, they can point to this episode and say, yeah, you know what, they do have a great relationship with Celigo. When we say, hey, we recommend Celigo not because we're getting an incentive, or not saying because we're best friends with Mark, but because we think it's the best solution, they can go to episodes like this and hear Mark talk about why it's the best solution. So for me, going down that path of focusing on NetSuite, focusing on e-commerce, wholesale, retail, manufacturing, and focusing on partnerships, authentic partnerships with people like Mark and you, Jordan, who I recently met, I think is where we want to go. If I may just say a quick quote, JP, the CTO of Boosted, we had him on our podcast, and when they were vetting solution providers and alliance partners and anybody who was saying that they could do the implementation, he talked to 10 or 15 different agencies or entities that said that they could do it for them. And I said, well, why did you pick us? He goes, cost, expertise, and the most important was attitude. We don't want to be left high and dry with the implementation partner who didn't have the right attitude, that was not going to, be there with us every single step of the way. That's not going to provide us that guidance every step of the way. That's not going to give us honest feedback. I think it was pretty touch and go near the end of last year with our team and your team, Mark, and trying to make sure that everything was up and running for their go live date. Mm-hmm. And we accomplished that goal. And that's what I'm talking about in terms of where we want to go, where I'm sure Mark and Celigo wants to go is, yeah, at the end of the day, it's just numbers. The automation, it's scripting, whatever. But who are you doing the work with? Who's going to be there to make sure that it's running smoothly? Who's going to be there to guide you in the next 3 to 5 years of your ability to scale through Celigo's automation and through NetSuite's ERP. It's the people that helped you at the first place that have the right attitude. Because unfortunately, you have some who were like, hey, you want NetSuite? Oh man, here are all the modules you're going to need. Are you sure? You don't trust me. You're going to need all these modules. You sign it. They start paying. Okay, see you later. Oh, you're not going to implement it? Oh, no, I just sell license. Sorry, I don't do implementation. Okay, you should go to this guy. Then you talk to that guy or that lady. Hey, can you do the implementation for me? Yeah, sure. Should we use Celigo? Yeah, sure, if you want to. Are they certified? How many implementations have they done with the brands in your space that know how to actually map out the tiles in Integrator IO for Celigo for you? Oh, you don't know. And then like, hey, you've paid for my implementation. Know what wrong? Try somebody else. Okay, well, you're not the same person who sold me the license. You didn't get me implemented. Now am I supposed to do? And unfortunately, we get brought in. It's business for us. I'm not going to say no to business. But that's why, to Mark's point, we want to be there earlier in the conversation because it doesn't have to be a nightmare. And Celigo doesn't actually have to be that expensive. It's really just on how you scope out the initial license, implementing it correctly, and then really having the right kind of team and support to make sure that the automations are functioning according to your milestones and the way that it's intended to. I'm sorry, that might have been super long-winded, but I hope that makes
No,
sense.
not at all. That's good. That's perfect. I think that that like the attitude aspect of it is incredibly important. I think just from talking to you and from hearing Mark talk about you, it's really clear that both you and Sellers Universe has a really good attitude and seem like a fantastic partner. And obviously, that's why we wanted you as our first guest on the Technology Leaders podcast. So, yeah, I mean, everything you says. Excuse me, there's a fly on me. Is God, get away, Mister Fly. Is lining up. God, having a rough patch over here. But
you're
no,
doing great, Jordan. You're doing great.
you. That's fantastic to hear. I know we're getting a little bit short on time, and I don't want to take up too much of everybody's day. Mark, did you have anything that you wanted to ask or throw out there or lob up, if you will? And if so, or if not, I'll have some kind of closing statements. But just wanted to leave the alley open to you, or the lane open to you.
Yeah, Jordan, the only thing would be, a lot of this for a company embarking on an automation journey is having the right attitude, back to attitude, right? Having the right attitude themselves, looking at what they want to be as an organization, go in with a good plan, hopefully adopt automation first mindset, and then pick a good partner, somebody you trust, and get started on the journey.
That's perfect. I think that's a very good way to round it out. And I think as more companies come to adopt this automation first mindset, it not only makes our job easier, it not only makes Martin's job easier, but I think it makes running a business just easier because, like I mentioned earlier, you're addressing the cause of all of the challenges and problems that an automated business can have rather than the symptoms. And to bring the metaphor full circle, you can avoid those band-aids. We are getting towards the very end, and so I just wanted to end on something a little bit light, a little bit different, because I feel like these business podcasts can be very serious, and not that that's necessarily a bad thing, and I don't want to go goofy either. So we'll kind of meet somewhere in the middle, and maybe for the guests out there who are listening, who've made it this far, one, thank you, but two, completely discounted outside from work, in your own personal life, Martin, do you have any maybe passions or interests or hobbies that you think people might kind of connect with? And if so, we'd love to hear them. And Mark, maybe take some notes because I'm going to ask you the same question, and then we can get back to our normal lives. I'm curious, what do you have for us, Martin?
I am a super, super huge Star Wars fan. And I know when people say, oh, I love Star Wars, I've watched all the movies. I'm talking about there was a game that came out like 10 years ago called Star Wars: The Old Republic, and it was like a massive online game. Me and my best friend from high school, who equally loves Star Wars, created an online guild and a website and a forum, and we gave each other titles like you're the Grandmaster, I'm the Grandmaster, and we had, I think at the height, maybe like 300 people around the world as part of our guild, getting ready to go into the game together as a clan or as a group of friends playing together. And I probably ran that community and website for a good 2.5 years. So there's even a lightsaber behind me. Like, I'm not even kidding. You know what I'm saying? I built this at Disney when I was there in Florida a couple of months ago. So yeah, super huge Star Wars fan. Am I ashamed of it? No. I am married, so I guess I can say it out publicly. It's no problem.
That's good. You're deep in the game, as they say. And
Oh,
if
yeah.
any listeners out there decide to piss off Martin, excuse me, make sure he doesn't have his lightsaber. Otherwise, you'll be missing limbs. What about you, Mark? What do you got for the listeners? Any passions, hobbies, or interests outside of work? I know Martin kind of hinted at snow sports earlier, but what else?
Well, yeah, I spent a lot of my life focused, kind of optimizing around skiing for quite a long time. So that's probably my biggest passion. And it's changed in recent years. I have a 5 and now 8-year-old, and so it's for the last few years it's become about teaching them less about my skiing and more about teaching them how to ski. But it's still it's a big part of my life either way.
That's awesome. You're automating their skiing lessons, if you will. Well, anyways, I just wanted to thank Martin and Mark both for your time. This has been a really fantastic conversation, diving into everything from passions and hobbies and interests all the way to automation first mindset, as well as what both Celigo and Seller Universe does. For all those listening out there, thank you so much for your time. And we will see you soon with episode 2 of the Technology Leadership Podcast. Bye, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.